The thought police, instructed by the Mayor of Brussels, saw fit to try and undermine and denigrate what is free speech and free debate.
Continue to listen because I'm going to ask an important question a little bit later.
No alternative opinion allowed. This is the updated new form of communism.
Do you think that's because of what you stand for, Mr. Farage?
This conference in Belgium has just been shut down. The Mayor of Belgium was unhappy with the list of far-righters attending, and of course this includes a number of politicians in the UK. But I think there's something bigger here. There was commentary by the press.
Farage and his National Conservatives are having the best day ever. They are hopping up and down on the spot because their conference in Brussels has just been essentially curtailed by Belgian police, by the Brussels police, who have been sent in by the Deputy Mayor to shut it down over fears of a public disorder. And there is nothing that NatCon loves more than being told to be quiet.
But for two venues to cancel is absolutely outrageous. And what you may or may not know in the audience now is that this venue, which accepted this booking last night, and we give huge thanks to the Tunisian owner of this business for his courage in allowing free speech to take place.
And the problem I have with this involves this man here. He was able to go around saying whatever he wanted, because, like Nigel Farage and many others, they demand that they have their right to free speech. But there are other comparisons. Hitler also suggested that he was a victim, that Germans were victims, and it's a card that both Suella Braverman and Nigel Farage play constantly. And it's also a card that you see played in horror movies.
Did it ever occur to you what would happen to my future if I were to fail to live up to my responsibilities?
And this comes back to the question, what do you do with people from the far right? Well, in Belgium, they've got stringent laws on far-right rhetoric, on racist rhetoric. We do so in the UK, but do we enforce it? And there's a lesson to learn from history. There were stringent laws in the Weimar Republic to deal with racism, but they weren't enforced. And this is part of the reason why Hitler was able to get off so lightly. And this unfortunately irks me with the press. Why are they continuing to listen to someone who so obviously lied about Brexit and has used over and over again racist rhetoric? And let's face it, Nigel even himself recognised that he'd caused a bit of a stir in Belgium when he said this.
I wouldn't be welcome back in Brussels. Belgium is not a nation. It's an artificial creation.
Many things are an artificial creation. The United States is artificial. The United Kingdom is artificial. And yet, Farage makes this out to be a big deal and insults an entire country. And it didn't end there. Nigel was invited onto Good Morning Britain, where his hypocrisy continued. He pointed out that he, as a UK national, had come into the EU to try and voice that it should be dismantled.
The conference was really a gathering of people who were sceptical about the power of the European Union, the project of ever closer union.
He also talked about Viktor Orban.
We of course have got Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary, attending as well. It was a thoroughly respectable bunch of people.
I've had personal dealings with Viktor Orban's right-hand men, and they complained to me in 2016 about London having a choice between a Muslim and a Jew. And the problems created by Braverman, Farage, and even Viktor Orban are summarised pretty well here by Barack Obama.
And politicians have tried to exploit people's fears to divide.
I find it even funnier still because Farage has complained about Obama interfering in UK politics, foreign politics, and yet he's doing the same in Belgium.
It was a big V sign to the political class in Westminster and the big banks and the big businesses and Obama and the global leaders.
Wait a minute, did anyone else catch that?
And the big banks.
Another little hypocrisy. He complained about the big banks, and yet he also moaned he couldn't be part of the club.
They're telling the press I don't meet their wealth threshold. Well, they'd never mentioned that before in the previous 10 years.
Anyway, let's go back to the main point. What do we do about far-righters? Well, in Belgium, is it really wrong for them to shut them down when these people are clearly racist? Or is it better, as the press have done, and they attempted in the Weimar Republic, to allow them to talk and try and knock them off their perch when they bring up ideas? Obviously that failed with Brexit.
And nothing they would love more than being told to be quiet in Belgium, in Brussels of all places. But of course, this was a conference that we might have ignored
Altogether.
totally, but for the Belgian police and their jackboots, which is, I'm sure, how it's going to be described, going in and treading on these innocent popcorns.
Innocent. Starting to see what I mean? Someone who's been confronted, Suella Braverman, by a Holocaust survivor about their language being similar to that of the Nazis. Farage having put up racist posters. Viktor Orban and his right-hand men telling me that it's a bad thing for London to only have the choice between a Jew and a Muslim. And they're saying they're innocent, and they're platforming them right now.
But actually, have they made a huge mistake in being heavy-handed when it was a conference that no one was taking much notice of? I think that they have made a real colossal error in Brussels to react in the way that they did, and kind of also in a terribly unsophisticated way, I might add. Because, you know, you think of Brussels, and I spent God knows how much time there, going backwards and forwards to, you know, EU councils and whatever else over the years. And they are used to having all sorts of people on their doorstep. They're used to hosting kind of controversial topics where people feel very vexed about them.
I've actually got no problem with people criticising the EU. I could think of a number of criticisms, including what they did to Greece and the issues that took place over there. But to come off and suggest that Farage and Braverman and Viktor Orban are on the same ilk as people just criticising the EU and demanding better of it, I'm just not buying it.
We know this group of people quite well, and they belong to the I am a victim whatever happens. So I think if the police, I mean, you mentioned, you know, Farage and Coots, you know, I'm a victim because I don't get the smartest bank account in the world. Suella, I'm a victim because nobody enacted my plan when I was Home Secretary. You know, Liz Truss, we heard from yesterday, I'm a victim because I crashed the economy, it was the deep state, what made me do it. Trump, I'm basically Nelson Mandela / Jesus, I'm a victim. I think if the police hadn't come in at that point, the rhetoric would have been pretty much the same. We are all victims, we are all caught in a world that doesn't understand.
Then don't play into their hands.
I'm not
Then
disagreeing
don't
with you,
give
but
them
I'm just saying I don't think what we would hear from that conference would be materially different, because I think this is the rhetoric that we are getting used to hearing from NatCon.
And do you know who else plays the victim card? Narcissists. And as I said earlier, it's not just horror characters in movies. It was Adolf Hitler as well, who continued to play the victim card and suggest that he was attacked by the mainstream media, that he was a victim of immigrants and other minority groups, that he was the weak one. And look where it got us. Have a listen to this.
Even the folks who won don't seem happy. You know, you'd think the Republicans, they won the presidency, they won the House, they won the Senate. They're still mad. Which is interesting.
And it's the same here. Brexiteers won the referendum in 2016. There's obviously a debate about that to be had. But they also won the Commons under Boris, who was a Brexiteer. In fact, he was the lead Brexiteer. That means that they had the Commons, they had a referendum, they could easily influence the Lords, and they probably had the monarchy in the back pocket. So with all of that, they're still complaining that they're the victims and that they have no power.
And the interesting thing is how out of step this kind of victimhood rhetoric, particularly from, as you say, our elected politicians, is with most of the general public. They just don't get it. The public isn't interested in whether Suella feels a victim or whether Farage didn't get his lunch. They just couldn't give a toss about this.
And yet the very thing they're complaining about, platforming Nigel, they're doing it right now. As ever, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as to what should be done with the far right in the UK and abroad. Should they be platformed? Should they be allowed free speech? Or should they be shut down? Once again, thank you to all my listeners who keep this channel going and growing. Thank you to all my Patreon and YouTube supporters. You also keep this channel going in hard times. Once again, thanks for listening. Bye for now.